Without further ado, I wanted to talk quickly about BSides and its history. So BSides started as one conference that was made because, not a lot of people got a chance to speak. And basically it built out into a community, and now we have BSides Charleston, we have BSides Charlotte, we have BSides Augusta. And a lot of that is due to our next speaker, who we have the honor to bring up, the man, the beard, and the legend, Jack Daniel.
So, thanks. Yeah, let's do this presentation thing. Let's skip this part of it. So, yeah, 4 acts. Don't worry, 3 of them are fast, but I want to talk about a few things. But first, it's early, so let me mess with your head a little bit. So you didn't expect to hear the phrase shredding on a cacayum this morning, but that's what Luna Lee was doing there. And I don't know what you expect today, but if you open yourself up, you're going to meet some really amazing people, learn some stuff, have good conversations. It'll be awesome. So thanks. Welcome to Security BSides. But as TJ mentioned, you're not just here, but BSides is a global community, and you're part of this. You're actually part of all of this. You're part of all of this. In July of 2009, a handful of us got together and kind of gave a place for folks to give interesting talks that maybe wouldn't fill a room in DEF CON or Black Hat. Maybe talks that weren't quite ready for prime time. Maybe ideas like diversity in InfoSec. The first couple of big BSides, we had those panels. It took 5 years for RSA to address that and 8 years for Black Hat to address diversity in our industry and in our hacker community. But we're part of this. There are 4 Security BSides events today. Delaware, Boise, Lisbon was yesterday, here, and I'm blanking on one. One more. There have been 373 Security BSides events since we started in July of 2009. 116 cities in 33 countries around the world. And it happens because local organizers make it happen. It happens because it's about the local community, building community, creating conversations. Forgive me for being idealistic, making the world a better place. And with that, I'd like to talk about the Security BSides Founders Circle. We're a growing global community. And if you've ever, add an addition to your house or something like that, you have to put a foundation under it to support it. And so unlike some organizations, I like to think of our Founders Circle as being every single person who's ever been involved. So that means if this is your first event ever, I want to welcome you to the Founders Circle because you're part of the foundation of an amazing movement. So share. I like to remind people that you're participants, not attendees. So is this anyone's first BSides event? This is cool. Anybody who's first, Hacker Security Con at all? Cool. Let me do this. I'm going to put you on the spot. This is the most important thing you can do today, whether it's your first BSides or 68. Hey, I'm Jack. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. I'm nowhere near as technical as I used to be, but I know some people. Don't be shy. Welcome to the family, and if there's anything I can do, I'm find on that internet thing. So thanks for joining us. And everybody else, first time. And whether or not it's your first time, meet somebody, say hello. We have some challenges in the industry that we can't fix alone, but more on that. I'm not going to dwell on this. I've done a series of presentations on stress and burnout and survival skills, but I will say this. This time of year, people start to get bleak. I mean, the horrors of 38-degree weather, having spent 40 years in New England. The sun went away. It's like, what do you mean it's dark now? And it's end of year and all the pressures. Take care of yourselves and take care of others. I'm not going to dwell on it, but really, you need to take care of yourselves. And now, the keynote-y part of the keynote. So I've been doing this for a while, but not as long as most people think, because I'm old and you make assumptions about me. And you're right about the old part, but you know. But together we have a lot, and that's a recurring theme. There are two topics and a highly complex timeline we're going to work through here, discussing the past, present, and future of InfoSec. And the timeline can be a little overwhelming, but you know, stick with me, and hopefully it'll make sense by the time we get to the end. Here we go. You know, at one point in time, we had really simple systems, single user, single process. We could secure them. We didn't. They were horribly insecure. But if you wanted to know who was using the computer, you looked at the console. And then as it advanced, if you wanted to know who was using the computer, you pulled a wire and chased it to the end, and whoever was at the other end was who was using it. And then we started actually making progress. I mean, this is even before my time. You know, early secure operating systems like BBN's 10X were interesting because it was designed to be secure. If you're really into the history of it, it's kind of funny to see the dumb basic security mistakes they made with it. But then things started getting more complex. Multi-user, multi-process. We were getting better at security, but we were also making them more complex, which makes everything more interesting. I have a reputation for being pretty cynical, and it's well-deserved. It's one of the challenges with burnout in our industry is that you have to be skeptical to be pretty good at this, I think. And it's easy to cross the line, but there are some people that would propose rather than any sort of progression. We're just in this hopeless hamster wheel of pain, as Andy Jaquith called it. And there's some truth to it. But you know, first let's look back a little bit, and hopefully you'll see that as far forward as we've come, we've also not left a lot of things behind. And one of the things that I like to do is adjust the screen before I start giving a talk so I don't look like an idiot as I'm sitting here. That's one of the things I like to do. I don't always do it, though, so we'll fix that now. So no matter when you join the industry, or even if you're trying to get in, you're still in school, whatever, as soon as you land, all you can do is run to try to keep up. We have a dynamic and fast-paced industry, and we're tangential to the tech field in general, which is out of control, insane, and all you can do is try to keep up. That means we rarely have a chance to stop and look back and see, how did we get here? Why do we do this? Who is it that got us here? You know, and things were different. You know, in the earlier days, there was no security industry. Security might have been something you did when you worked in technology, unless you were OSS during World War II or NSA or GCHQ or whatever. You know, security wasn't your job. It was just part of what you did. And another thing is a lot of the early stuff is not readily available on Google. And for most of us, even me, I forget that things existed before Google. It's like, wait. There aren't a lot of Bob Abbott's papers that are available on Google without a lot of digging and knowing exactly what they are. So with that, come on, you can do it. I want to share a few people and a few ideas, give you some ideas. This one, let's see who tears up on this one. We lost Becky earlier this year, a truly amazing person. If you think about the people like Marcus Random, Ron Gula, Rob Graham, people that were leaders in the early intrusion detection, network behavior analysis field, basically the network security part of our industry, which was a huge foundation of it. Becky was a mentor to every single one of them. When she was at NSA, yeah, there's baggage with NSA, believe me. I'll never get a clearance. Let's just leave it at that. Becky mentored a ton of people. She was known as the den mother of intrusion detection. She caught me through a mutual friend, referring to her as that a couple of years ago, and she explained she wanted to be known as the cranky broad. We lost her at the beginning of this year, and a lot of us are still reeling from it. Anyway, she did her time at NSA before 9/11, before they became what they are now, to politicize just a little bit. Then she went into consulting, and the thing is, she's from South Alabama. And when she moved north to get a government job and marry a damn Yankee, her father said, when you're done with that, make sure you come home because we need some help. So at the end of her life, she spent the last few years of her life at the University of South Alabama setting up a cybersecurity program and making good on her promise to Dad. Most amazing hugs, info mom to many, many people. And we lost her, and it kills us. Most amazing hugs in the world. Anyway, Becky is somebody that any of us in the industry has touched directly or indirectly. You may not know it, but somebody like Ron Gula or somebody like Rob Graham or Marcus Random owes something, probably a lot, to her. So I like to point her out. But let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about hackers. Arguably the first electronic or electric hacker, Neville Maskelyne, inventor of the pay toilet, stage magician. He also did a man-in-the-middle attack on Marconi's wireless systems and put ahead of the message that was supposed to be on the wire or on the wireless an obscene limerick about Marconi himself. The guy, in receiving that and reading it, was reading it aloud before he realized that he was saying naughty things about Marconi. That was 1903. Did a wireless man-in-the-middle attack. And it was to people that were possibly going to be investors. So if you think man-in-the-middle is something new or irrelevant or I wouldn't call it espionage, but economic sabotage is something new in our industry. This dapper gentleman asshole was way ahead of us. People we all know, Alan Turing. Okay, Alan Turing. Look, everybody, I assume most of you know, invented the computer. Well, sort of, but maybe Ada Lovelace sort of had the ideas, but somebody that most people don't know is Doc Keane. He was an engineer. The ideas that Turing had weren't something you could actually build. It took an engineer to take the ideas from this mad genius and turn them into something that somebody could assemble. And then he supervised it. And you know what it took? It took people who knew how to solder and screw things together without cross-threading them to actually build it. And that's a really important thing to remember, is that when you're in the trenches, you're part of making stuff happen. You may not always understand why. You're burning your fingers trying to solder some giant thing that he's calling a computer, computational, I don't know. We're just trying to break codes to defeat the Germans. But when it works right, we change the world, wherever we are in that stack. And don't forget the engineers and things. So he oversaw the Bomba. Called Doc because he carried, leather, basically doctor's satchel with all of his tools and stuff. But then, these are some folks that are often overlooked. This dude, Henryk Zygalski, the reason they needed to build the Bomba to break the Enigma codes was because years before, this mathematician came up with these sheets which helped them on paper crack earlier versions of the Enigma codes. The Poles beat the Germans at math. They didn't hold the advantage for long, unfortunately, but he worked with Jerzy Rzycki and Marian Rijou. This dude, this trio of mathematicians and cryptologists had, probably forestalled invasion and other things because of doing them. They get overshadowed by Turing, maybe appropriately, but their stories should be heard too. If we come forward from ancient history, but somebody that was around for part of that, the computer will touch men everywhere and in every way, almost on a minute-to-minute basis. Every man will communicate through a computer, whatever he does. It will change and reshape his life, modify his career, and force him to accept a life of continuous change. There are people in our world today that don't think we're at that point yet. There are people that don't believe that when they use a landline, they're using a computer. But I assume most of you would think this is a fair statement, this assessment of the impact of computers on our lives. I don't know how many other people would have said it in 1966. Willis Ware was an amazing guy. He also understood the privacy implications of that, and he's why we had the first government privacy stuff. Good old Jerry Ford, after pardoning Nixon, gave us the first Privacy Act in 1974. The good old days when the government cared about our privacy. But anyway, Willis Ware is somebody that, again, unless you're an old goat or have done some research, you probably don't know about. And that's unfortunate because this dude was brilliant. He was at RAND for 40 years, 52 to 92. Started his career doing electronic identify friend or foe, automatic identification of aircraft during World War II. Took that through decades. Couple of things that he's most notable for, the document called the Ware Report, which pretty much defined government and military security and technology for many years. We'll dig into it in a bit. It's an amazing report, and it's remarkably prescient, and we'll dig in a little bit here. Computer, the sexy title of Computer Controls for Computers, or Security Controls for Computers. 1970. Let's see if any of this holds up. Certainly, security control will be cheapest if it is considered in the system architecture prior to hardware and software design. No shit, really? User convenience is an important aspect of achieving security control because it determines whether or not users tend to find ways to get around, ignore, or subvert controls. Huh. Well, thankfully we've got that solved. Here is a horribly dated, useless little drawing that is sketched up in that document, which was drafted in 67 and final edition was 71. And take a look at this and kind of laugh at how dated it is, and then change 2 or 3 words and maybe a graphic or 2, and realize that I can do an introductory security course with this image right here. Change a few words, and we could just put the internet there where it says communication lines, and we can put your iPad or whatever there instead of that terminal. But this is it. This is our world today. Few things have changed, but that's it. The Ware Report actually reads, it's not terrible. Some of it's dated. It's worth a read sometime. But yeah, there are people who've been doing this. I do need to stop and say something. I want to make it clear. Defining problems is, generally speaking, way easier than fixing them. So don't get too bummed about how long we've known these problems. But if you can't figure out what the root problem is, then you're probably just going to put Band-Aids on it And you'll spend your entire career putting patches on a shitty OS instead of actually making real progress. Not to editorialize about the state of computers, but here's somebody else that very few people outside of government and old-timers know about. Bob Abbott, an amazing guy. Let's see, what did he do? Author of the first set of privacy and data confidentiality policies for healthcare. He wrote the first multi-user multitasking OS for Cray-class supercomputers that went into 24/7 operation. Led a project that produced the first physiological monitoring system for open heart surgery recovery patients. He's arguably the first information security professional. When he left the government, he became a consultant and did security consulting in the early 70s, before that was a thing. Sneakers, the movie Sneakers. The team that you saw there was based on Bob Abbott's original Red Team at NSA. Every member of that cast that was on that team had personality traits from people that Bob brought in and taught. Closing scene when we finally find Darth Vader, when James Earl Jones appears, his name in the show is Bernard Abbott, a nod to Bob Abbott, who was critical in that movie. Very cool dude. And then there was this, research into secure operating systems. This is a little bit more dated and a little more tedious to read, but if you're really into this stuff, there's some interesting things here. But there are a few parts of this report, again from long ago, 71 to 76, that are telling too, that I think are interesting. I mentioned BBN 10X when I was talking about it earlier. It was a secure operating system, and boy, they made some dumb mistakes. But anyway, let's see if there's anything useful that we got out of this in the early 70s. This document will be especially useful if it reduces the current tendency for the same security flaw to reappear repeatedly in different systems. Sorry, Bob. You tried. You told us, man. So there were 7 key flaws that they identified. Again, easier to identify than to fix, but if we don't identify them, we're not going to get a root cause. So incomplete parameter validation. Maybe it gets better. Inconsistent. Oops. Come on, it's got to get better. Oh, he warned us about race conditions, time to check out, time to use. I wish we could get down to worrying about this. The first 3 have kind of beat us up. Oh, not this one. Thankfully, we have solved authenticate. Oh, we put prohibitions and limits in that don't actually stick. And logic flaws. Whoops. Okay, so after making fun of that, I will point out that we have largely moved those out of the operating system, firmly deposited them into the application layer where they're actually more dangerous. But that's all right. It's progress. It's progress of a sort. Jim Anderson, I like to talk about because of a quote from Spaff from when he lost him. His contributions involved both abstract and practical, generally credited with inventing and explaining the reference monitor idea, audit trail-based intrusion detection. Using audit trails to do IDS before network IDS was a thing. He was a contributor to the WARE report. There was the Anderson report to the Air Force, which defined military cyber security, forgive me, computer security. I work for a vendor. I have to say cyber a lot. I feel dirty. Orange Book, and a bunch of the Rainbow Series stuff. But this is what I love about SPAF, and it's worth mentioning. SPAF has become a good friend over the years, and one of the things I really hate is that I often refer to his obituaries and tributes to people that we've lost, but he's good. But this is worth a read. Anderson had broad interests, deep concerns, great insight, and a rare willingness to operate out of the spotlight, says the idiot in the Hawaiian shirt and top hat. His sense of humor and patience with those earnestly seeking knowledge were greatly admired, as were his candid responses to the clueless and self-important. Eschewed public recognition, preferring that his work speak for itself. Let me roll back there. Sense of humor and patience with those earnestly seeking knowledge. That's why we're here. If you want to learn, you're in the place to learn. You're in the place to share. Even if you've learned something you think everybody else knows, you bring a unique perspective to it. You just discovered Nmap can be useful for diagnosing your mail server. You probably came at it from a different path than thousands of other people who've discovered that before. Share it with somebody who doesn't know it. And I want to leave you with two, actually. There's a certification called Certified Ethical Hacker. Some folks make fun of it. Other people use it as a tool, as a stepping stone. I have a real problem with the term ethical hacker because it implies that hacking needs the title ethical in front of it. But if we want to talk about ethical hackers, this dude was a punch card systems expert in things you would probably call pre-computers, computational devices. The French used them for the census. And in World War II, the Germans overran France, and Rene kept his job working for the Vichy government. He was the only person who understood the systems as well as he did. He sabotaged the French census for years, saving literally untold number of lives because he made sure nobody could know. What did it cost him? He was eventually, towards the end of the war, found out. Arrested, imprisoned, and died at Dachau. He hacked the system to save lives. So when people talk about what hackers do, this dude is a righteous hacker. And I wish more people knew that story. There are some others. I've got a project called The Shoulders of InfoSec. There's a really hideous wiki. I've done a whole series of talks on some people, interesting things. And as I was getting ready and thinking about the past couple of years, I realized there's one more person that needs to be there, and he's not a foundational figure in the industry. But it really works well with the BSides idea, and that's our friend Rance, who passed away a couple of years ago. For those that didn't know him, he was an amazing person. But he shared what he knew, and he would come to events like this, and he would DJ at DerbyCon or things. But one of the most amazing things about Rance, the reason I call him a magician, is he would walk into DEF CON and walk past a bar in the lobby, and he would spot the one person who was really having a bad time, but doing a really good job of not showing it. And then the White Russians would come out, and they'd feel better. Rance and I were good friends, but we were never terribly close, and I realized why when he passed away. I never needed Rance. He found the people that needed him. And that's amazing. There are people like that everywhere, especially in this community. So, one, find those people, and two, become one of them. So getting back on track with the highly complex timeline. Let's come forward. Let's take a look at a couple of reports that I want to talk about. These are not brand new, but they're not ancient anymore. Science of cybersecurity. Most important attributes. We're trying to professionalize our industry. We're trying to be a real thing. Security is real now. It's not a joke anymore. So we're coming forward. Most important thing that we can do, most important attributes would be the construction of a common language and basic concepts in which the security community can develop a shared understanding. Okay, what's machine learning versus artificial intelligence? What do you mean by threat intelligence? We're not there yet, and it's one of our challenges. And when you talk to people about things, especially at BSides or other community events, if you're not sure how they're using words, these should be conversations. And you can get wound up about what's right and wrong, but at least make sure you have common language. It's been a challenge. Precise definitions matter. Until they're a precise set of objects that can be examined carefully and clearly, it won't be possible to increase the level of rigor. Here's one that drives me nuts, because this is, those of us who are or have been practitioners live this. Deep understanding. So this tends to be the academic versus practical, but it's sometimes government versus academic or whatever. We spend our lives applying patches and doing bandages. I'm not saying take your firewall away, but wouldn't it be awesome if things were secure enough that nobody needed to do egress or ingress filtering? Because that really could. So we apply bandages, we build complex bandages. Meanwhile, people think about deep thoughts, and the two never get reconciled. I won't say never, but we have a real challenge of if you try to solve the underlying problems, that doesn't. If you try to solve underlying problems, that doesn't get this month's patches installed. On the other hand, if we don't work on underlying problems, we're just going to be putting patches on forever. I used to know a lot about securing NT4. How much value is that today? Well, in a couple of environments is actually really important still, unfortunately. But, I'm sorry if you work there, but I used to be in the Boston area, and about 3 years ago I went back to a meeting where I talked about this when VMware just started becoming a really big thing in the NT days. I said to the group, this is really cool, watch, this is how I virtualize NT4, this is how I virtualize this thing, and there we go, and so now I'm not trapped on the old hardware, and everybody's like, this is cool, and I said, the problem is this means NT4 will never die. And they all laughed at me. So a couple of years I went back to the same group and I said, you remember when I said that? And like 3 people were still in there. We're like, yeah? Like, who's running NT4? And one guy's head literally hit the desk in front of him hard enough to hear. I'm like, told you so. But anyway, for most people, my knowledge of NT4 isn't useful. I had to have it at the time. I'm not trying to be depressing about this, but what I'm trying to say is that we need to do a better job of crossing the line with the deep thinkers so that we don't keep staying on this thing. One of the interesting things that often comes up, and this documents well, is guidance from other sciences. And one that I love is when people talk about learning from immunology in computer security. For a species to survive and thrive, you only need one breeding pair to survive. Your company survives, all the rest of us go out of business when the internet collapses. Is that an acceptable outcome for us? No. Okay, maybe we shouldn't directly apply these without thinking about what we're saying. 5/9's mortality rate is acceptable for species survival. I think we should probably aim a little higher, but that doesn't mean there aren't things we couldn't learn. So we need to break or at least bridge silos. One of the things that some of you I'm sure have discovered is we often talk about there's education and there's military and there's government and then there's the industry and then there's us in vendor land, the horrible people that we are. And then if you haven't been in there or dealt with them, you don't realize that saying government and military, don't put those two together, that's very different. Saying intelligence community, if you don't separate civilian versus military intelligence, that's weird, but then there's the stratification we all fight on a daily basis where you're trying to get somebody's attention above or below you. We just need to get by there. We need better language. The last two are things people have talked about for years, and we finally have the power to do it. Computers now have enough power to let us do some amazing things. Of course, we write software like Slack, which takes more power to run than... So anyway, let's move forward. People and machines. Here's an interesting thought. People were cheap. Computers were rare and expensive. I mean, it's just part of what you did for your job. You're you were not even a contractor. You were a government employee. Anybody work on a team that has too many highly qualified and talented people and you come in under budget? No. We have computer systems that are, it is cheaper to run a full operating system on a full computer for any task you want than to run an embedded OS on a custom chip. That brings a lot of challenges to it. Think about that. The idea of running QNX on a modified chip or something, running a light OS, that takes experts that aren't available and cost too much. Just throw it on a Raspberry Pi or something like that, and just have a stack of them. It's okay that, or some lighter thing, just running BusyBox. What could possibly go wrong? I'm going to wrap this up. In the middle, we had consumerization and commoditization of hardware and software, and then we added global interconnectivity, and we're screwed. At one point in time, you could explain everything that happened on a computer. It used to be like a computer science thing that at some point an instructor would say, hey, what's happening on your computer in this period of time? Can you do that with your video card right now? Yeah. The early days, it was all about crypto and confidentiality. And now we have to pay real attention to integrity. Even if you're not running, centrifuges at Natanz, the integrity of your data is challenging. When we encrypt things and store them in cloud, if we don't have integrity, it's all gone, because once bits move around, we're hosed. Here's a terrifying thought. Who controls most IT spend in organizations these days? Your marketing department, because they spend it on advertising, cloud platforms, media, customer tracking. They control more IT spend than IT in many organizations. Think about that. Automation. Yeah, that's cool stuff. If we do it right, it's great. If we do it wrong, it's not. So what about the future? Douglas Adams. We lost him too soon. I really didn't foresee the internet, but then neither did the computer industry. Not that that tells us very much. Of course, the computer industry didn't even foresee that the century was going to end. So, to those of you that, like me, were at work on that New Year's Day, that's another whole nother rant. It was a fraud. It was a fake. No, thousands and thousands and thousands of us busted our asses for a very long time to make sure nothing happened. We can actually do this stuff. We did this stuff. It wasn't overhyped. We made sure it didn't create real problems. Rudy Giuliani, go home. Let's see. So I'm no futurist, and certainly not a Willis Ware, but I'm certain that we'll still have some of the same problems. But for all of the horrors of these things, would you like to not have computers in your life? Would you prefer that we didn't have an internet and global interconnectivity? We got to remember how much good is done by these things. Everything old is new again. Obsolete network security stuff is relevant again because IoT means we have, does this sound like Windows 98? Insecure and insecurable systems connected randomly with more ports open than they should be. So maybe we need to know what's happening on the network. Oh, right, because endpoint security doesn't work on endpoints. That's problematic. We got rid of agents because they would bloat our systems. And now if you don't embed agents in a lot of systems, how does that work with container security or even virtual? But yeah, no, if we're not embedding agents, we have no visibility into anything anymore. But the processors are way better now. We can do things like, kernel level micro virtualization. We can do micro virtualization on hardware. We can have a reference indicator, a reference model running on the same chipset as your operating system and see what's shifted. There's really cool stuff we can do now. And we can run Slack and eat all of our memory. And this is where you expect me to predict amazing things, and I'm not going to. Here's the future. Recurring theme. If you want to do lasting good for security and for yourself, make friends here and elsewhere and across communities. Investment in immediate technology is required, but it's ephemeral. Investment in big problems might solve some things down the road. We've got to do it, but it's a long game, and we've got to work together to do it. And with that, I'm done, but that's not the end. This is just the beginning of BSides Charleston. So thank you very much. You've got time to grab a bio break and maybe a snack, and then on with the rest of the conference. Thank you, guys.